Oh, there definitely should be. Israel's leaders should be arrested and tried before the International Criminal Court. But the UN is the UN, the ills and evils of the UN system. As long as the Security Council has the right of veto for the 5 permanent members, then it's all about politics. There definitely should be, and this is a test for the enforcers of the would-be enforcers of international humanitarian law, and those would-be enforcers are failing. It's not accidental. A lot of countries are now turning towards the global south, turning towards China, turning towards BRICS. The global order that came into being after the Second World War and is based on concepts like international humanitarian law is on its last legs. I don't know if it will manage to survive. It will probably only survive if say the European Union and the Global South come out against the United States. But that's going to take some time, although Trump is doing his very best to accelerate that process. Its immediate effect on the civilian population, I think, when it comes to food, I believe that the effect will not be immediate. And generally, I think this is, even in Israeli eyes, a short-term measure. But I think the effect is drastic because this is happening at the beginning of the Holy Month. And Palestinians are once more left to the mercy of, the elements. Israel is talking about cutting off water, cutting off electricity. There is, I think, a growing sense of fear among the population of Gaza, and rightfully so. So I think that's the effect. There's a destabilizing effect on the public mood. Israel's goal in this blockade, they're saying it up front. It's an attempt to apply pressure to Hamas to return hostages and to violate the deal that had been signed 6-7 weeks ago with 3 phases, and try and impose Israel's agenda, the agenda of the Netanyahu government. I think this is just short term. I don't think Israel is ready for a resumption of the war, the act of genocide. And I think this is mostly posturing. It comes at the cost of Palestinian lives, but Israel has proven that it is completely oblivious to that cost, so it doesn't mind paying it. I think it will, and I think that is part of Israel's plan. I think Israel is trying to, Israel has always talked about this and has tried it on occasion and has always failed. Israel is trying to bring a measure of destabilization into the life of the local population as sort of an encouragement to go out and do Israel's dirty work for it, that is, topple Hamas's regime. I think it's definitely going to affect the observance of Ramadan, but the images I'm seeing from the Gaza Strip indicate great resilience and a willingness to undergo the holy month dutifully, and carry out the instructions and strengthen the community and do everything Muslims do on Ramadan. I think the gap between Israel and the Palestinians grows wider every day. And the fact that this is being done through Ramadan only accentuates not just Israel's brutality, but Israel's inability to look beyond the very, very immediate short term. That's not the game the Palestinians are playing. They've never played that game. And every day that Israel embraces something like the hell plan makes Hamas look more responsible, more credible in the eyes of the world. And slowly, this has to do with the Trump administration's belligerence towards the world at large. Slowly, the world is turning away from Israel. Depends on what level you ask. Morally, I think it's a crime against humanity, not just legally, but morally as well. I think it's a sign of Israel's great weakness and great failure, because Israel unleashed a genocidal campaign that lasted about 15 months actively and has failed to get Hamas to do what it wants Hamas to do now. So the more Israel resorts to brute criminal power, the more it reveals its weakness. It is addicted to power. It cannot do anything that is not this sort of hell plan. But the truth is that it can't really apply the hell plan either. Israel is not prepared, it lacks the resources to go back to war, despite the rhetoric, despite the plans to call up 400,000 reserve soldiers to enter Gaza. That's not going to happen. Israel may bomb, but even that is not going to happen. Israel has failed. And what it is doing now is trying to bully and blackmail Gaza and Hamas into caving despite Israel's failure. It's an attempt to disguise that failure. So will the hell plan come into effect? I'm not so sure. I think it's mostly an attempt by Netanyahu to calm the hard right as he considers his options. And frankly, I don't believe he has any other option of moving forward but continuing to deal with Hamas in one form or another. I think Israel's very direct, overt policy of taking hostages is once again disgraceful and criminal. I don't think it helps Israel. Again, unless the only level where it helps Israel is again this very, very short-term, immediate level, because we treat these prisoners as chips that we can cash in for our own. But Israel is not even succeeding in releasing its own prisoners. In fact, it's killing them. So is this a counterproductive policy? Very much. Counterproductive for Israel's international status, counterproductive for any hopes of a resolution. But Israel is growing more and more brutal, more and more narrow-minded. That is the result of having opted for a genocide, an active genocide for 15 months, and failing. Because this has to be said. Despite the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands who have died in Gaza, Israel has not been able to carry out what it set out to do. Okay? We haven't pulled off a genocide. We've only dug ourselves into a deeper hole. So all of Israel's policies are counterproductive, but it's a process. The world, certainly the global north, has been so used to providing Israel with complete impunity for its actions. It's very, very hard to shake off. But I really do think this is what's happening. Oh, there definitely should be. Israel's leaders should be arrested and tried before the International Criminal Court. But the UN is the UN, the ills and evils of the UN system. As long as the Security Council has the right of veto for the 5 permanent members, then it's all about politics. There definitely should be, and this is a test for the enforcers of the would-be enforcers of international humanitarian law, and those would-be enforcers are failing. It's not accidental that a lot of countries are now turning towards the global south, turning towards China, turning towards BRICS. The global order that came into being after the Second World War and is based on concepts like international humanitarian law is on its last legs. I don't know if it will manage to survive. It will probably only survive if, say, the European Union and the Global South come out against the United States. But that's going to take some time, although Trump is doing his very best to accelerate that process. It's mostly domestic politics as far as Israel is concerned. Netanyahu, he has to make a decision. Is he going to follow through on the deal and risk alienating the people who are keeping him in office at the moment, the hard right, the religious right? Or is he going to continue walking the tightrope and believing that the Trump administration will allow Israel to get away with the sort of radical measures that it's taking at the moment, which are, it's important to mention, war crimes in and of their own. Starvation, blockade, cutting off electricity and water, as we hear talk that Israel is considering such options. These are all war crimes. But the thing is, Netanyahu, despite what seems like a very radical course of action, Netanyahu has not yet decided. Netanyahu doesn't like to make decisions. He likes to do things and present them as inevitable. He has not yet decided, because a decision would have meant either a return to active bombing or an embrace of the deal that was signed. Netanyahu is trying, as he does always, to have his cake and eat it too. He doesn't have a lot of time, even though the world is now busy with the trade wars and the American tariffs and all that. He doesn't have a lot of time because I think the world is shifting on Israel. There's a marked change in the approach of the EU that has a lot to do with Trump shaming Zelensky. And I think China is becoming more active in favor of the Palestinians, and I think we still have to wait for the Arab League to announce its plan. So I think the tide is turning, and Netanyahu knows it. He's trying to stretch it long enough to win political points among his base, but if he's given the proper incentive, I think he will switch tracks and resume the deal. Well, again, I'm ashamed to say it, and it makes me angry to say it, but the truth is Israel no longer cares about the death of Palestinians. That is different from actively killing Palestinians in an attempt to destroy Palestinians physically. But Israel doesn't care. Palestinians who die, it's their responsibility. They're used as human shields. They supported Hamas. There are 1,000 excuses and rationalizations, but the truth is that Palestinians underwent such radical dehumanization in Israeli society that now, at the very best, Israelis will say it's unfortunate that they died, but that's what happens in a war. Because for Israelis, this isn't a genocidal campaign, this is a war. So the killing of Palestinians and the torture of Palestinians and the condition of the Palestinian hostages and captives being released is of no interest to Israelis at all. I think the U.S. doesn't want war. It doesn't want a Middle Eastern war. I think it's afraid of a Middle Eastern war. And I think the U.S. is interested in a deal. But I also think the general posture of the Trump administration is, we don't care, you do what you want. And in that sense, they're forcing Netanyahu's hand. He has to make a decision. So the Trump administration is playing a major part, but not by providing clear support for a specific course of action. Playing a major part by applying pressure to Israel. Even as it sells Israel bombs and approves defense aid, the Trump administration is actively applying pressure to Israel to come to some sort of understanding. Meanwhile, it's also reaping political points from Israel's brashness. Okay? So now Trump can say, we don't care about international law, and here is our close ally not caring about international law either. But another point about the Trump administration is that also, despite the brash rhetoric, the Trump administration is actually quite weak. Its position is to strive for isolationism. It doesn't want to be involved in all of these conflicts. It wants to withdraw. It doesn't want to influence them. That's what Trump is telling Israel, I think, and I think that ultimately this will push Israel towards a resolution. Look, it's no secret that Trump, at least, again, rhetorically supports Israel, but really, I think Trump doesn't care. I don't think Trump feels obligated to an American electorate that is invested in Israel or in Hamas. Trump said this on the campaign trail. He considers most American Jews to be his enemies because they consistently vote for the Democratic Party. I don't think Trump has any emotional attachment to Israel in any way. I think it's a traditional stance of Republicans, but I really do think Trump doesn't want a war. And if Trump becomes convinced that Netanyahu is using him to score domestic political points, Trump will walk away just as he walked away from Zelensky. Trump doesn't care.